Welcome everyone to the PYRESWAP show for a Thursday episode in this first time slot ever. Today's Thankful Thursday, so I am going to just express my gratitude to each and every person who's a part of this project. Whether you're contributing actively or passively, whether you're watching every single one of these shows or just once in a while. I want to thank everybody who's consistent, first of all. I want to thank everybody who's consistent. I want to, personally express my gratitude for your consistency. Generally speaking, you are known for what you're consistent at. Does that make sense? And I want to thank you for being consistent. And that's all. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions or clarification needed on that? And of course, welcome to everybody watching on Twitch or Kick or YouTube or whatever else we're all streaming on. So today, the charts for PyreFan, PyreAVAX, and PyreBNB, they look like they're up. I mean, we can review that right now. Everything is up on 24 hours. This is a modest amount of being up, which is actually just exactly what I want. Yeah, like a modest amount of being up. This right here, no video on Discord. What about now? It's it shouldn't be that hard to there we go. Okay. Yeah, it is in fact looks like it's returning back to what would be the trend line. So you saw an overcorrection, you saw an undercorrection. Right here, the line looks a little bent, but literally this is where we kind of expect it to be. I hope this is clear to everybody. Over speculation happened because over speculation does happen, and there is kind of like this time-based sequence of people exiting at a certain point where they feel like it's not going up anymore, right? Like they're just assume that if it's not going up anymore, it's not going to find support here, it's going to crash. So this is kind of like what helps crypto's volatility. It just ends up being this, I guess what you would describe like a cowardice contest. Does that make sense? But that's totally fine. That's totally fine. This is all designed for the nature of the Web3 user. If we look at the other tokens and we zoom it all out, you can still see here, this was the 6th or whatever, our day of pivot. It still looks like we're an overall uptrend. There was a day here where there was like some tumultuous chart activity, but other than that, it doesn't seem to be anything that's that remarkable. It was probably just, I don't know, somebody freaking out. Yeah. Oh well. And I think PyreAVAX really shines as just an example of like what the textbook uptrend would look like. So PyreAVAX is showing virtually no drama. Does that make sense? One of the best parts about this project is that we have these 3 tokens. So when we're looking at charts for data, when you're looking at charts for data, you can literally figure out how to filter out the noise by looking at what would be happening to all of them. Does that make sense? So, I think that a lot of people have trouble differentiating signal from noise, but if there's anything that's correct here, it's the fact that we have 3 tokens that arguably have the same tokenomics working for them. So you can kind of figure out like what exactly should it be looking like and what it shouldn't be, right? I hope that makes sense, everybody. Yeah, does that make sense? I could ask. Does that make sense? Howdy, Trigger. Fantastic. I'm assuming it makes sense. Anyways, so in our documentation, we actually have this snippet which talks about how the Pyre gas tokens like enhance and harmonize the gas coins that are native to that chain. So when we're talking about this exact example, we mean that like we mean the relationship between PYREVAX to AVAX, right? The relationship of I can write it in blue if you want. Pyre phantom to phantom, right? I don't have a gigantic yellow marker. I can write it in green, I guess. Yeah, Pyre BNB to BNB. And anyways, I was doing some diagramming earlier today, and I don't have this like completed, so to speak, but generally speaking, you have this building on the idea of the utilizer to speculator ratio, which I've been talking a little bit about this week. Does anybody here remember what I was talking about? Concerning that ratio? Okay, no worries. So when we talk about utilizer to speculator ratio, we're talking about the amount of token, like let's say for Phantom, let's say we're talking about AVAX, it's actually better. We're talking about the amount of AVAX being used for gas, right? AVAX volume used as gas versus, really actually just, I can just put this over a vinculum as it were, versus AVAX traded speculatively. Make sense? So this fraction here becomes the utilizer to speculator ratio. You can measure it in dollar amount in a single day. You can measure it wallet count for a single day. There's a couple different ways to measure it. It's sometimes hard to find the numbers, but these are various ways where you can kind of like arrive at this ratio. Making sense? So generally speaking, you have Avalanche volume uses gas and you have Avalanche traded speculatively. Now what you'll know, what you'll learn if you measure these over time is that this number ranges and this number ranges. Does that make sense? And also, because of such, the ratio between them also ranges. Does that make sense, everybody? Does that make sense? The amount of Avalanche getting used as gas. Do you guys remember in December of 2023, there was this fucking thing on Avalanche with inscriptions, with like runes or whatever, ordinals? Yeah. Phantom had a... Phantom didn't nearly have the problem Avalanche did with it. Let's put it that way. Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah. Anyways, Avalanche, specifically, Avalanche, the gas price jumped up probably like 20x. So like it literally became impossible to do anything. To deploy a smart contract costed like $75 or something like this in Avalanche gas. And this is an example of like something high in the range of AVAX getting used as gas. And you know what's great about that is that none of those projects went anywhere and they were kind of just there out of like this surge of bullishness. And like people, people get a bunch of stupid money and then they spend it in stupid ways. Yeah, they try to like bundle it in. It doesn't work that way. Anyways, Avalanche volume uses gas, Avalanche traded speculatively. This number ranges, and this number ranges. Does that make sense? Therefore, the ratio between them also ranges. Do you guys understand that concept? Fantastic, winner. Thank you so much for answering the question. Okay. So, Since these two things range and the ratio between them ranges, it's almost like it would imply that the price of Avalanche too would range. Would you guys agree there? That a lot of Avalanche's behavior also ranges as far as price goes? I'm going to assume you're saying yes. Okay. Make sense? So the fact of the matter is, no, CJ, what I mean here is I'm talking about the quantity of Avalanche, or the quantity of the dollar amount. We're talking about 2 piles of AVAX, the token itself. 2 piles of it, right? So 1 pile of it is AVAX used as gas. Does that make sense? Just as gas. Deliberately, like AVAX getting used as gas. I don't know. Well, it is okay. I get why you're saying this, but I wouldn't use. Okay, what I use, it has that similarity to its relationship, like whether you're using it today, whether you're using it tomorrow, so to speak, right? But it's not. I think I would use this type of vocabulary instead. Does that make sense? I would not like obfuscate them, right? I'm not trying to make these two words relationships. Does that make sense? Like hot and cold is not the same thing as tall and short. Does that make sense? Right? Like hot versus cold, tall versus short, right? That's the same thing, right? Well, not really. But you're not passively using it as gas. Yeah, hot and cold is not the same parallel to like tall and short, or like left and right. Well, indeed, and some shorts are shorter than talls, and some lefts are lefter than rights. Yeah. I don't really see any of that stuff being that interesting. Yeah, I think that looks like 2021 stuff. Yeah. I mean, you guys can talk about that, but like, I get why you guys think it's interesting. Yeah, I'm already trying to move past that. Yeah, I think that was already there in 2021 and 2022. Yeah, a lot of that was Andre Cronje, by the way, or rather his impact there. Yeah. Concentrated liquidity. I designed this concept for concentrated liquidity back in 2021, and usually using a token where you could buy priority rights to certain bundles or certain pools of concentrated liquidity, meaning like when the price moved into a certain range, you could have priority rights to use liquidity in that range over other traders. That's a topic for another fucking year. But Avalanche used as gas against Avalanche traded on a chart. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like right now, it's the same concept of talking about PYRESWAP getting staked to make more money versus PYRESWAP just getting bought to be held, right? That's the difference between passive and active. But like, I wouldn't say using it as gas is the same thing as passive versus active. Like using it as gas is active, speculating is also active. I wouldn't call either one of these passive. But when I talk about passive staking, I mean like it's like passive income, right? Passive income meaning you go to sleep and in theory you wake up to yield. You should not go to sleep on the Incarnation Witch Vault. Yes. I don't know what you were referring to here. But anyways, okay. Avalanche uses gas versus Avalanche traded on a chart. This right here ranges, and the prices of it range. And because the prices of it range, you have a relationship of PYRESWAP, TWAP, therefore also ranges. Does that make sense? And what I mean to say is, if PYRESWAP was frozen at a single price, does that make sense? If PYRESWAP was frozen at a single price, Avalanche could move, and it would still affect the range of this TWAP. Do you guys understand that frame of reference? Right? If PYRESWAP is just like a frozen fixed point, we have this is the Thursday show is going to be a good one. I can tell. This time slot's going to be a winner. PYRESWAP T-ball also the ranges. Does that make sense to you guys? Like Avalanche moves up and down. Make sense? Therefore, there's also a range just because of that. because PYRE-AVAX TWAP also ranges, this arguably, this causes the utility value to range. Does that make sense to you guys? So think about Tomb Fork's boardroom, right? You're trying to get back to PEG. You're trying to get to 1.01 TWAP, right? Well, if you go down to like 0.95, but then the gas coin rallies. I know that back in the day they didn't do liquidity this way. It's like the distance to PEG can range based on the performance of the gas coin. Make sense? And it's not that it's making the PEG coin worth less money in dollars. It's just outgrowing it. Does that make sense? It can also make it range the opposite way and bring it closer to PEG from going down in price. Make sense? This will be easier to see when we have PYRE-AVAX and coins like it, Pyre Gas. Yeah. When we have them in more liquidity pools that are deeper against things like stable coins or things that kind of don't just trend with Bitcoin anyway. I hope that makes sense. PYRE-AVAX therefore also ranges. This causes the utility value to range. Makes sense? So the point being here is, why am I talking about this? I wanted you to see the sequence. Gas usage ranges, speculative volume ranges, therefore the ratio between them two ranges. Since all those three range, the price of PYRE-AVAX also ranges. Does that make sense? Since the price of AVAX ranges. Since the price of AVAX ranges, the TWAP reference of PYRE-AVAX also ranges with respect to AVAX. Make sense, everybody? AVAX, okay, we'll do it like this. AVAX gas. What does it say ranges here? Right? AVAX gas ranges. AVAX spec therefore ranges. Does that make sense? The ratio, utilizer to speculator ratio, therefore fucking ranges. Therefore the price ranges. AVAX price ranges, and if AVAX price ranges, then PYRE-AVAX TWAP will also range. Do you guys understand this chain of dominoes? Have you guys ever seen like a tide pool, or what's it called? The wave machine, like a water park? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? What are those things called? Not the lazy river. Yeah, but you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Well, Fexer, thank you for joining us through. Thank you for pushing through exhaustion. Today's Thankful Thursday, so I wanted to say thank you to Fexer for joining while being tired. Make sense? So it all ranges. Yeah, that one right there. And then the wave comes. Yeah. Yeah. That's a different one, but also a good one. Yeah. Okay. It ranges. So you always have these ranges. You can have these bands. Does that make sense? This will be easy. Again, the PYRE-AVAX TWAP, right now, it kind of tracks Avalanche price. We don't have the Pyre gas coins in liquidity with stable coins too deep, maybe like a few $100. So like it mostly tracks with PYRE-AVAX. Does that make sense? It mostly tracks with AVAX or Phantom or BNB, whatever have you. Point being here is we're gonna keep moving from there. But I want you to understand something. We're gonna look at a different sequence. I want you guys to consider a blockchain launching for the first time. Can you consider a blockchain launching for the first time? Can you consider this? And I want you to think about the launch event. And I want you to think about the ICO event. Can you consider it? Right? What is the ICO? What does that mean? No cheating from people in the room who know this. Initial coin offering, yeah. And what, like quite often, they actually offer ICOs with a pre-sale, right? They literally have like, you can buy this coin today, right? Right? Or you can buy this coin as a token on another chain, or you know how it used to go. Yeah, and I'm not gonna use Sonic as an example, by the way. I'm gonna use something more like generic because yeah, Sonic using Phantom to burn one, that is refreshingly unique. But yeah, when we talk about an ICO, it does actually still matter. There is still a cost. But what is the actual movement happening here? When you see a chain launch for the first time, quite often the gas coin is sold speculatively in the present based on perceived future. Who here knows the word I'm going to use here? Who here knows the word? Can you guys guess the word I'm going to use? I'm trying to figure out how obvious it is. No cheating for anyone in the room. Yeah, can anyone guess the last word in the sentence? Utility. We'll call it utility. Yeah, close enough. Close enough. But utility. Do you guys understand? When people are buying a coin at ICO, they're buying it based on like, okay, this is the coin that effectively is the ticket to that blockchain. This coin gives me access to that little place. Does that make sense? That digital fucking biome, as it were. Anyways, so the fact of the matter is, though, this right here is in the linear. This right here is the power of 1. Does that make sense? This is the power of 1. What else is happening when an ICO happens? Also, there's a different color for this. The gas coin is sold speculatively in the present based on the popularity of the speculation. Does that make sense? So I just write sold. Oh, well, I mean, it's bought. Sorry, I'm talking about like referring from the company. But you're right. I guess you would think to the fucking user it's bought, right? Yeah. I was thinking about like the way that the company or the foundation or the labs or whatever, however they're running it, right? Like how are they distributing it? So yeah, you're right. It would be bought though, but leftward or rightward is kind of like the same thing. It's transacted, right? Yeah, it is bought speculatively in the present based on perceived future utility. But like the foundation, they're also the ones selling the concept of the future utility. Do you get what I mean? Like they're persuading that this is the blockchain that's gonna make it, you guys. This is the one, right? Make sense? Additionally, because these events draw so much hype, this right here is the power of 1, by the way, right? Do you guys understand what I mean? This is the fucking power of 1. That's a little carrot. But if we wanted to square this, if we wanted to put it into if we wanted to put this into the quadratic, it is bought speculatively based on present speculation. Does that make sense? Because the first degree of speculation is speculating on future utility. The second degree of speculation is speculating on the speculation. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? You're now speculating on, okay, lots of people are buying this coin, so I'm going to front run them and then just exit at the top. I'm going to pump and dump. Make sense to you guys? This is the second degree of speculation in something like a chain launch event for their gas coin. I know I made my hand like this, like as a coin, but you guys understand what I mean. The proverbial coin. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? So when you have this chain launch event, you have 2 layers of speculation, right? In order to see this, we have to do Fourier transformation of a price chart, which is difficult. But the point being is, do you guys understand that these 2 layers of speculation are there? Right? The first speculation is you're speculating on the future utility, because it's not present utility. Would you guys agree? It's not present utility. Right? Like the moment of launch. It isn't socially necessary labor, but I appreciate your ideological background for its diversity of opinion. It isn't labor. Yeah. Yeah, it isn't labor. Yeah. Yeah, like we're actually not talking about, we're not talking about, no. Yeah. That's not what we're talking about. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, that's actually not, yeah. I know what you're saying. Like socially necessary labor, I know what you're talking about here, but that's not even it. Like you could have like this perceived idea of what has to be done, but it's still not, yeah, it's not even like an upkeep. Yeah, it's not like, okay, this has to happen for the sake of social collapse. It had, okay, the usage, like, I guess, okay, the utility needs to see a certain usage for the fucking chain to not collapse. I get what you're saying there, but I think that's only confusing, like more confusing, because it's not so much that like we're talking about the effort of people as much as it is kind of like the cost. So when we talk about, we're talking about the instrument, yeah. Yeah, like, okay. So it's socially necessary. Okay, but here's the problem. Okay, here's the problem about socially necessary. Does that make sense? It's actually privately necessary. Yeah. Like that blockchain is not like a that is not society. Does that make sense? In fact, that society doesn't exist yet. It would be more like thinking of the like American frontier era where people were just going out and claiming land, Manifest Destiny style. Yeah. So like I know what you mean, like infrastructure development as like what is socially necessary, but this is still like a different concept. You might see that there's a parallel there, but this is not exactly what we're talking about. Right? But again, I'm glad you understand what I'm saying here, because we're going to explain again. No, it is, yeah. No, we're definitely not. We're definitely zoomed in. Yeah, there is differentiation. Yeah, there is differentiation. You don't actually arrive at the comprehension of this from just making things another thing. Like apples and oranges are both fruits. Like you don't actually get close to understanding from that fucking line of thinking. You are going the opposite direction in the old ideological hierarchy. Yeah. Like you don't learn more about bacteria by saying that like, okay, like diatom algae is the same thing as like what's inside my stomach. Yeah. Cyanobacteria is the same thing. Yeah. Yeah, but that's still like you're still completely losing sight of detail, which doesn't arrive at comprehension. Yeah, music is just frequency, right? Music is just vibrations through the atmospheric pressure of the planet. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna have to ignore what CJ's saying. I'm gonna keep going. Okay, so the gas coin is sold speculatively in the present based on perceived future utility, bought speculatively based on present speculation. This right here is certainly not anything like socially necessary labor or anything like that. But generally speaking, what becomes the socially necessary labor is arguably. By the way, the word I use here is actually affordance. Yeah, like the word here would actually be like affordance. Does that make sense? So the speculation is an affordance of the utility activity. Does that make sense? So like the reason you even have time to listen to music is because society must have enough like generated wealth and like free time where people can work as musicians. Does that make sense? It's like, okay, that's an affordance of the fact that we're not hunter-gatherers. Back when we were hunter-gatherers, we did not have the affordance of music, right? Because the hunter-gatherer, that would you would describe as a more socially necessary labor, right? Right? The more fundamental job, right? Is that what you're describing? Like fundamental jobs that from which provide for like derivative jobs, correct? Oh yeah, no, I mean way before then, CJ. Yeah, I mean way before then. Yeah, I mean way before then. Yeah, and by the way, yeah, and they still had that affordance, right, when they weren't having famines. Yeah. Yeah, like that was an affordance for like when they weren't dying. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like Because the ones that are actively hunting, they don't have time to dance and sing. They go back to the village and they dance and sing. Does that make sense? They're the ones doing work right then, right? So like, the fact of the matter is though, yeah, like there wasn't necessarily people in those tribes that all they were the musicians. Does that make sense? It's like everybody could have like a skin drum, right? Or people learned to sing, or women would sing when they worked or something like that, right? But like, it's not the same thing as like, hey, I'm gonna be an entertainer, right? And only do this. The tribe does not have that like size of economic depth, not like 200 people. Yeah. It's not like, oh, hey, this person's just, all they're gonna work on is their music. It's like, okay, are they, yeah, anything else? Yeah, no, it's you don't have the ability, you don't have the affordance to specialize like that. If that makes sense. Yeah, you can't work as an economist. Yeah, you can't work as an economist in a fucking Paleolithic tribe either. Does that make sense? It's like, what's this kind of guy gonna do? Okay, he's gonna write calculus to explain how markets work. You don't have markets yet, right? And anyways, okay, so the word there is affordance, right? But it's kind of like the antonym of what you're describing. Do you get what I'm saying? Oh yeah, I would be a witch doctor, right? Okay, anyway. Okay, I would be a tea leaf reader, a tasseographist. Okay, moving on, you guys, moving on. Do you guys understand everything I said about like, at the moment of chain launch, block 1 or block 0 as it were, the coin being sold, whether it's being acquired from airdrop, whether it's being acquired through an ICO, whether it's being acquired from a like a mead, perhaps, like you would describe Sonic, it's being acquired based on the fact that it's like we're speculating on the future utility value of this token, right? And the fact of the matter is, even if you're not intending to use it for utility, you're still speculating that somebody else will. Does that make sense? Right? Which I guess what you're saying is like that the usage of it becomes that social. Yeah, I get what you're saying now. Okay, I get what you're saying. I'm not going to use that language though because I'm thinking more about what the instrument is doing. Yeah, what the instrument is doing, right? You're still betting on somebody else actually doing the job. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Okay, I think that's not socially necessary labor. Yeah. No, well, okay, it is politically biased. Yeah, it makes more sense to just like use the fucking objective language. But I get what you're saying. Yeah, the future usage of it has to get done, right? So everybody can sit around crossing their arms and wait till somebody cleans up the mess, right? Anyways, okay, so the fact of the matter is though, like that chain then is still in this position. Does that make sense? Because they're also betting that somebody else is going to do, quote unquote, the socially necessary labor of doing what? Creating dApps on that chain. Does that make sense? Deploying dApps on that chain that last. Make sense to you guys? Okay. The fact of the matter is, if nobody deploys dApps on that chain, a socially necessary labor. I think calling it socially makes it sound like it's broader to a chain, but it is like a microcosm of a socially necessary activity, a socially necessary labor. Make sense? Yeah, fantastic. I'm glad your seance worked. Creating dApps on that chain therefore has to become the underlying. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like we're reverse engineering society, right? Like we're betting that somebody else is eventually going to start laying the bricks so we can actually build a wall or build a house, right? Does that make sense? It's like we're going to set up a brick shop. He's going to set up a mortar shop, right? And eventually somebody's going to build a wall here. Somebody's going to build a nice little paver path, a footpath as it were, right? A sidewalk, as we say in America. Somebody's going to build a furnace, right? Creating dApps for that chain becomes the fundamental need of that chain, right? Does that make sense? It does in fact become like the necessary value add, right? Right? It has to essentially come into existence, right? So the fact of the matter is they have to use that money made in ICOs to give out grants. Does that make sense? So first of all, This is why the token needs to have this underlying utility. Does that make sense? And I'm talking about utility because the usage of it as gas ends up being what allows for speculation, which is now what I think is the angle which CJ is talking about. Does that make sense? Yeah. right? Like, but the fact of the matter is, if you have like a meme coin, right, there is no utility. Does that make sense? So effectively speaking, you can only speculate on speculation. Does that make sense? There is nothing else to effectively terazu the activity. Make sense? Like there isn't like another role because there isn't going to be any labor showing up, right? In theory, somebody could build the utility for a meme coin. That would be the socially necessary labor, but like that doesn't happen because that's not even in the narrative. That's not like in the paradigm of people thinking. Yeah. Yeah. So the point being is, PYRESWAP, I'll go back to red here. PYRESWAP is thus because of that chain of events I draw before. AVAX has variegation in its status, right? AVAX has variegation in its status, and the statuses were those ratios, those ranges. Does that make sense? All those ranges, AVAX has variegation in. It could be anything from the news cycle. It could be from a random pattern showing up in the TA. It could be from some celebrity tweeting it. It could be from like some sort of partnership struck or some sort of hashtag, or it can even be based on a meme coin or nonsense at all. Like, does that make sense? It could be ordinals, right? AVAX has variegation in its status, which causes fluctuation, right? Which causes fluctuation in those ranges. Make sense, everybody? Right? Like just generally day to day, like AVAX is not frozen, right? There's like some new thing might happen, right? Like some new partnership might get struck. The Cornell University like puts it on the fucking internet, some shit like that. They run a Super Bowl ad. Who fucking knows, right? Does that make sense? So it has variation in its status, which causes fluctuation in those ranges. Well, the fluctuation in those ranges AVAX fluctuation, this begets fluctuation, yeah, in PYRESWAP. Does that make sense? So PYRESWAP is like this microcosmic derivative of AVAX in that sense. Does that make sense? And I drew this on a larger diagram. Right? Got it? So this fluctuation therefore begets fluctuation in this. Does that make sense? Now, AVAX fluctuation, it only uses the US dollar as numeraire. Okay? Right? US dollar numeraire. Does that make sense? It means, do you guys know what numeraire means? US dollar numeraire? AVAX, like, you can measure it against Ethereum, I guess, or you can measure it against Bitcoin, but everybody else is mostly just tracking it against the dollar. Would you guys agree? Right? Like most comparisons, the ratio, as it were, right? I don't know if you guys realize this, but every price in crypto is a ratio. Does that make sense to you guys? Every price. It's just using the dollar as the numeraire. And the numeraire is actually in the denominator of the fraction. Making sense, everybody? Fantastic. But PYRESWAP does not really use US dollar as numeraire. Like, our utility values are in fact gated. It uses AVAX numeraire. Does that make sense to you guys? So the utility fluctuation, the utility thresholds of PYRESWAP, and arguably the other ones like Frozen Tomb and Snow Tomb and whatever have you on the Avalanche side, these effectively, you could argue they're also doing a socially necessary labor. They are they are enhancing the usage of Avalanche. Does that make sense? Like the roles that Avalanche can serve is going up. Does that make sense? Because Avalanche has a use case as gas. Does everybody understand? A utility as gas, right? Does everybody follow me here? Yep. Okay. Well, when you start using Avalanche as a numeraire, right? This is also utility value. Does that make sense? It's very, very implicit. It's very, very microscopic. It's very intangible. It's very extrapolatory. Does that make sense? It's very theoretical. Make sense? I think that if we were looking at a graph, you would be pointing out intersections, and I would be pointing out cells. Yeah, you're just again. If this is Parmenidean Heraclitan again. Yeah. Yeah. AVAX numeraire. This is also utility value. Do you guys understand? Because now you're measuring things in AVAX. So avalanches, like the consideration for avalanche is now increased. Does that make sense? It has like a new prestige. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Okay, you guys understand the US dollar is what you guys use to measure Bitcoin, right? And if you live in America, you use it to pay your bills and stuff, right? But the US dollar also has a prestige. Do you guys know what that prestige is called? This title, this status to the US dollar? WRC. Does anyone know what that acronym is? Take a guess. World Reserve Currency. Bravo. Yeah. Does that make sense? So believe it or not, when crude oil is getting priced in Saudi Arabia, or if like whatever you call it, anywhere or whatever, things are priced in the US dollar in international trade, even if the US dollar is not getting used in the transaction. Does that make sense to you guys? Like they're using the US dollar as this kind of like international global numeraire. Do you guys get what I'm saying? And that effectively like is a instrument, it's a power projection. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Power projection? Is that concept ringing through? That is a power projection of the instrument itself, or the American empire, as it were. Yeah, it is. In fact, it is possibly losing its status as world reserve currency. Yeah, so that is being challenged right now. It is something to talk about. I don't think it'll like again. I think that this WRC, this was actually established in 1946 at the Bretton Woods Conference, which is also where the IMF was founded. So the International Monetary Fund was founded in 1946, post World War II. Basically, all the allies came. Russia declined, right? This was actually kind of the Russia not attending Bretton Woods was kind of like the lighting of the match of the Cold War, because they literally like they didn't want to kind of like line up to put their heads in America's lap. Does that make sense? They're like, okay, this seems a little bit too American for us. So like they didn't think that their interests were being represented. Anyways, so the United States naturally had a bunch of gold after World War II. And I mean naturally, because why wouldn't it, right? Anyways, because it had such amazing gold reserves at the end of World War II, it was argued at Bretton Woods in New Hampshire, the United States of America, in 1946, that the United States dollar would become the world reserve currency. And whatever the fuck that meant, it meant that all other currencies could just rely on the US dollar, and the US dollar would back itself in gold. Isn't that funny, you guys? The US dollar would just back itself in gold. Everybody else could take a chill pill and back themselves in the US dollar. Does that make sense? That was the original structure of the US dollar as a world reserve currency in 1946, okay? Anyways, yeah. So in 1971, whoops, they suspended the Bretton Woods system, which meant that we no longer had a gold backing to the US dollar. And if you look at all those funny charts in the American economy, there's just always this weird correlation with 1971 at this weird kind of like divergence point. Does that make sense to you guys? And this is kind of like why understanding how money affects the lives of humans is an important study, in my opinion. But anyways, it is, and now like being said in chat, the Chinese yuan, also known as the renminbi, is also known as kwai. If you've been to China, you would call it kwai if you're cool, right? Yeah, why kwai is now China is using it less and less, and I believe that BRICS, BRICS, they are already in their agreement. They're not required to use the dollar as that is the BRICS currency. Does that make sense to you guys? Do you guys know about BRICS? BRICS? I believe so. I think it's either being discussed or floated, or it might be already in policy. Oh, by the way, Turkey is possibly joining BRICS. No idea there. That's something I saw on the internet a few days ago. Yeah. So I believe that BRICS, they now agreed, or you know what, this is something I should Google, because I don't know if this is something that's being, yeah. Okay, sorry, the US dollar is the backbone of the BRICS trade, but okay, okay, the US dollar remains this thing. This is June 25th. Neither the euro nor the so-called BRICS countries have been able to reduce global reliance on the dollar. Okay, so this does appear to be, this was in June 25th. Now, this is 3 months ago. Could this be a propaganda piece? I should hope so. I would never be this bullish on the dollar. But anyways, the US dollar remains the world's primary reserve currency, and neither the euro nor the so-called BRICS countries have been able to reduce global reliance. The group's dollar dominance monitor, this is a fun little, let me try this out. Dollar dominance monitor. I've never seen this before. Anyways, so the dollar continues to dominate foreign reserve holdings, trade invoicing, and currency transactions globally, and its role as the primary global reserve currency was secure in the near and medium term. Dollar dominance, the outsized role of the U.S. dollar in the world economy, has been strengthened recently given the robust U.S. economy. Blah blah blah. Even as economic fragmentation has strengthened the push by BRICS countries to shift into other international reserve currencies. Okay, there you go. BRICS countries are the ones that are arguably at least discussing the reduction of the dollar status. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? The Atlantic Council reports that Western sanctions on Russia, blah 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 blah, accelerated efforts by the BRICS countries to develop a currency union, but the group have been unable to make progress on the de-dollarization efforts. BRICS is blah, 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 blah. Brazil, China, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the UAE. Okay, it noted that China has actively supported renminbi liquidity through swap lines with its trade partners, but the share of renminbi in global foreign currency reserves dropped to 2.3 from the peak of 2.8 in 2022. The euro, once considered a competitor to the dollar's international role, was also weakening as an alternative currency, with those looking to reduce their risk exposure turning to gold instead. Okay, I mean, not a bad Google results. I'm pretty not useless. I mean, it does at least defend the numbers. And this is called the Dollar Dominance Monitor by AtlanticCouncil.org. You can actually see where it's at. Arguably, 58% and 54% doesn't sound that dominating. That's almost very kind of like in the margin of error, right? If you're at like 58% and like whatever your opposition is at 42%, I don't really feel like that's exactly dominating. BRICS and de-dollarization, what's happening and why? Anyways, okay, more on that way later. Yeah, maybe we'll revisit that on Monday. Anyways, okay, we're right here about 50 minutes. And do you guys understand that concept about how the Pyre gas tokens help enhance the blockchains they're deployed on? Like literally because it elevates the status of the gas coin. Do you guys understand that at least? Like we're not creating this cross-chain reserve currency, as it were, but we are, but we are in fact basically creating this utility threshold concept, which allows us to care more about how we compare, to the gas token versus how we compare to the dollar. By the way, this is why I say that PYRESWAP is the #1 winter dApp. Does that make sense? Right? So during crypto winter, we don't even have crypto winter because crypto winter is just a ratio against the dollar. Does that make sense to you guys? So even if PYREVAX or PyrePhantom or PyreBNB has a lower dollar value in crypto winter, we wouldn't necessarily have a lower TWAP value. Make sense? And in the end, that becomes the way that we kind of harmonize the chain. Does that make sense? And I'm talking about waveforms here. Anyways, does anybody else have any questions? This was our first time at this time slot, and I think we did a good job. I think we kept it not boring. So if nobody has any questions, I want to thank you guys again for everything you do and for coming. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you, Mr. Producer, for taking me out. Have a great rest of your day.